lots of interesting stuff is going to happen in your book. I have no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean that those interesting things are what is propelling the action forward. And so really figuring out and distilling in your mind the stakes of your story and, those things what your character wants and what will happen if they don't get it.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and today I am sitting with returning guest Greta Kelly, co-host of the SFF Addicts podcast and author of the Warrior Witch duology and the Queen of Days. Welcome back to the show, Greta. That's right, show off those books.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming back to the show. Last week, we talked about pretty much whatever we felt like. We had some wholesome moments, a little bit of light cursing. It was a good time.
Sorry, I have a potty mouth. I'll put myself in timeout later.
No, it's okay. It's okay. This show is not for children, or it is if they're mature enough. Who knows? I don't regulate them. That's their parents' job. But this week, we're talking about query letters, something that I really don't know much about. And the first thing that I actually wanted to ask is a very basic question. What is a query letter?
Well, it is a form of masochism. No, I'm kidding.
Good start.
It is the letter that you need to write to present to an agent in order to get representation from a literary agent. And, you don't need a literary agent in order to get published. However, if you want to be traditionally published, 9 times out of 10, you need a literary agent. So if traditional publishing is the path that you want to take, then this is the episode for you.
Welcome. So I wanted to ask you as well, why did you pick this subject as what you wanted to talk about for the focus for our second episode?
Query letters are probably the hardest thing for new authors to learn how to write because it is a completely different skill set from the book that you just finished writing. And it's a huge hurdle, but it's one that you kind of have to figure out how to cross if you want to be traditionally published. I have been, I'm represented by a literary agent right now. She is my third literary agent, though. So I've been through this a couple times. We mentioned in, I think, the last episode that I met my first agent at a conference where she critiqued my query letter. So in a sense, I was in the query trenches, even if it wasn't for very, very long at that point. But she left the business during the pandemic. Actually, 2 agents of mine left the business either during the pandemic or shortly thereafter. Because as hard as it is to be a writer, it's just as hard to make a living as an agent unless you are one of the very few lucky people who has family money or something. So, as much as we all want our author-agent relationships to last our entire careers, that's not really realistic. So for various reasons, you may find yourself unagented at certain points in your career. So you may as well learn how to write a query letter early on because it will only keep serving you as the years go by.
So this might be slightly off topic and we will definitely come back. So you use a query letter to get an agent, and what do you use the agent for? What do they advocate for you?
9 times out of 10, you are not going to be able to approach a traditional publishing house just by yourself as a person on the street. There's maybe 1 or 2 traditional publishing houses who either allow unagented authors to submit to them or maybe have submission periods that occasionally open or closed. So that's reason number 1 why you would want an agent if you want to be traditionally published. Agents don't just sell your book, though, to a publishing house. They are also the person that is going to negotiate the contract on your behalf. So they will be, when you enter into negotiations with a publishing house, they are going to ask for the sun, moon, your kidney, and your first child. That's just what negotiation is. And if you don't have someone on your side who knows, everything there is to know about contract law, then you're probably going to make some poor decisions and sign things that aren't actually in your best interest. So that's reason number 2 why you might need a literary agent. And then, there's the psychological aspect of just having anyone on your side who can give you some sort of unbiased opinion about the state of your career and what you should do next strategically. But increasingly, agents are also expected to have editorial chops to their name as well. So, for instance, with all three of my agents, we have always done at least one round of edits, if not more, on all of my books before they go out on submission, just to make sure that they are in the absolute best state possible. And so it's easy for an editor to say yes to those books. So agents really do a lot for you if you find a good one, and if you find someone that you can work well with.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely critical in that line. I mean, wow, yeah. I didn't realize they did so many jobs, though.
Yeah.
Like adding editing on top of all of what they're already doing seems like a little much. So
it's a lot, and that's something to consider when you're trying to find the right agent for you, is that everyone always wants the top agents, the most experienced agents, the ones with the best authors in their proverbial stable. But that means that you might not be the priority, which is okay, because, there are other extenuating circumstances where that might, be made up for in other areas. But there is something to be said about having a young, hungry agent who wants to grow their career just like you want to grow yours. So don't count someone out when you're, compiling your list of agents to query just because they're new, because new doesn't always mean bad.
So what advice would you give for someone trying to decide, who do I send my query letter to?
There's a really great website out there called Manuscript Wishlist. I would start there because basically it's becoming like an industry standard where most agents will post the things that they're looking for, the books that they love, the types of stories that they want to see in their inbox, as well as the things that they're not interested in. And having both those pieces is really, really helpful. So it's a lot of information to sift through because there are thousands and thousands of agents on there, but it at least gives you a place to start compiling names. And then, you have to do your research. And I don't say that lightly because it is going to be a lot of research, whittling down that huge list of names into people who, once you do research and you look at their industry websites, maybe you creep on their socials, don't be weird about it, but just like, this is a business relationship that you're hopefully going to have for years. It's okay to do a little bit of research. But they might not necessarily be someone whose personality matches yours, or they might not even be accepting new authors, or they might have just switched into, bodice ripping romances and you write, horror. Just knowing all this stuff, your list is going to slowly shrink down and down and down. And you don't want to waste your time or theirs by submitting to people who don't accept the kind of book that you wrote. It does not say anything about the quality of your book or, your ability to become an author. It just means that it's not what they're into right now. And you don't want someone advocating for your work who doesn't really believe in you. So do your research carefully, but start with Manuscript Wishlist because it's free. And it's just a huge swath of information that you can glean from in one spot.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly useful. I've never heard of that, so I'll make sure to put it in the comments below so that people can find it really easily. Mm-hmm. That sounds like an incredibly useful tool.
Yeah.
So you got your first literary agent by going to a conference. We talked about it a little bit in the last episode, and you brought it up earlier. Were you in the query trenches before that moment, or was that when you had started and you just lucked out and got that first one?
So my big plan was that I was going to go to the conference, and it was a very flash in a pan sort of conference. It doesn't even exist anymore, which is a shame. But you were able to submit your query package, so your query letter and I think the first 10 pages of your manuscript before the conference even began. So the agent would come into that one-on-one meeting with you already having read your submission package. And so I was like, great, I'm going to have this meeting. I'm going to talk to a couple agents that I really love. Worst comes to worst, they're going to give me some really great advice on my query letter and my first 10 pages. And so I knew that as soon as the conference was over, I was going to just take their advice, spruce up what I felt like needed to be spruced and start querying. And luckily, I was only querying for a week or two before the actual offers of representation started to come in, which I feel very lucky. And authors who have been in the query trenches for literal years, I'm sorry, please don't hate me, but a non-negligible amount of success in this business comes from luck, and we all unfortunately grapple with that at some points in our career. But I was very lucky. at that point to have met my first agent, Jennifer Udden. She briefly stepped away from agenting, which is why I had to find representation elsewhere. But she is an agent now, and she's still a dear friend, and I still recommend her to people. So if you're querying now, Jen is great. Go look her up.
Yeah, look her up, see what she's looking for, and importantly, what she's not looking for.
What she's not looking for, yes.
Both those lists are very important.
Yeah, so many people waste their time querying agents who just are not looking for what they're writing for. Probably because they think, oh, well, maybe they'll read my opening pages and just be inspired. And yes, I'm sure that has happened to one unicorn, but you are not it. So follow the rules. When they ask for a query letter and a synopsis, don't give them a query letter and your entire book. Follow the rules, please. I beg you.
So when writing a query letter, are the rules very different for each literary agent, or is there a standard set that most people adhere to?
Yeah, there is very much a standard formula that agents, 9 times out of 10 are looking for. And if it's not what they're looking for, it will say something like to that effect on their website. So always be careful that you're looking at their website. And honestly, most agents nowadays are using a query management form called Query Tracker. So, which makes it easy for everybody, because if you use Query Tracker, then you can save your query letter on there, you can save your synopsis, and just kind of fill out the boxes for each agent that you're submitting to. It's very easy. I think it is a subscription, so, bear that in mind. Well, I think this the base is free for everybody to at least submit through, but if you want the extras, like seeing where your query letter is in their list of queries, that's like an extra subscription, I think. But basically, the elements of a query letter is a 1-page tops letter that includes summary paragraphs of your work, like 1, 2, maybe 3 if you're lucky, book stats, like a paragraph about age, category, that stuff, and then a small paragraph about who you are as a person. So it's easy to say, but the moment you try to start boiling down your 150,000 word book into 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 if they're short paragraphs, like it's very difficult. It's a horse of a different color, that's for sure.
That was something I ran into when I started writing my blurb for the first time. I was like, it took me over 100,000 words to tell this story. Yeah. How do I do it in 30?
Yes, and they are compatible skill sets. So all this work you're doing, creating your query letter, will go towards your back of cover blurb someday. So it's not wasted effort.
Which is super useful. Yeah, that's super useful because that's what people pick up the book and go, oh, should I buy this? Oh, hot damn, I should.
Yeah, and by and large, the same reason that people end up buying your book is the same reason that an agent is like, oh, send me more of this. So it's a good skill to learn.
So is there any customization that you tend to do for query letters for different agents? Or if I have 2 agents, can I send them almost the exact same thing?
Like 90% of it, yes. You certainly, obviously you want to change their name. You don't want to just write Dear Agent.
Dear so-and-so.
Yeah. You could write, it's perfectly okay to write Dear John Smith or Dear Jane Doe, because, the worst feeling is sending a query letter off and realizing that maybe you misgendered someone or you assumed they were married and they're not. Like, these are tiny breaches of etiquette that aren't going to get your query letter thrown in the trash. But why make someone like, when they're going into reading your query letter? So the first thing is, pay attention that you're spelling their name correctly. And if you don't know how they identify, just write their full name. That's totally fine. It might feel unusual because it's not how we were all taught how to write letters in school. But in this case, it's perfectly fine. The other piece of customization, I would say, is if you have a referral. So if you have a friend who is like, hey, my agent is amazing, you should refer me to them, and they say, sure, I can do that, then you can say, I got your name from X author who said that you were amazing to work with and that you would probably really jive with my, book that is about such and such. So you could do that. If you don't have that prior relationship with the agent or with someone who is referring you to them, an easy piece of customization you could do is actually in your comp titles. So I said earlier on that there's going to be a paragraph in your query letter that is about book stats. So that's the paragraph where you will say, my book is a 90,000 young adult fantasy complete, or my book is a young adult fantasy complete at 90,000 words, who that will appeal to readers who loved X meets Y. The comp titles is a really good sneaky way to show the agent that you did your research, because you are someone who has listened to me so far, and you have gone to Query Tracker, and you have found the books that they love, and you have found the authors that they are currently obsessed with, and you've used you're now going to be able to use that information in your query letter. So they'll say, oh, this person is really thoughtful, they know how to do their homework, they're thorough, and they've got great taste in books. And again, that just hikes you up just a little bit farther on the list. So that's the two easy pieces of customization I can give you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. How important is comp titles in querying? Like, how do you choose which fantasy novels to compare your book to, or any genre that you are really in, besides just looking at and going like, oh, they're looking for this, my book's the same?
Yeah. Comp titles are another necessary evil in querying. They show, it's not like just a test. I mean, some of it might be a little bit of a test just to make sure that you are someone who actually reads books. As we said last episode, there's a startling number of writers who don't read. Don't be one of those. But it's not just that. They also want to see where in the market you think your book is going to fit. So when you say comp titles, oh God, this whole topic used to give me hives, because I just thought like, oh my gosh, I have to find my book's exact doppelganger. How I don't have time to read all the books in the world to find one that perfectly matches mine. Well, that was never going to happen. You know, there's no two books that are exactly the same. What you're trying to find is like pieces. So if your book has great found family like qualities to it, you could say, if you loved the found family aspects of The Lies of Locke Lamora, my book is this. Or if you love, you know, romance like in Bridgerton, you could comp to that. And you can comp TV and movies. You just can't comp more than one. So you can comp one TV and or movie, or one like hella best-selling title. So like you probably shouldn't comp Game of Thrones, but you might be able to get away with it if it's like a very unique aspect to Game of Thrones. If it's like, oh, if, you know, I can't remember if Catelyn Stark was your favorite character of Game of Thrones, you could do something like that, because it's like very specific and it gets to something at the core of the story that's not just, it's the fact that it's like a global phenomenon. But ideally you comp two books that were published within the last 5 years that sold like, well, best-selling, but weren't like Game of Thrones or, you know, Fourth Wing or something like that. So, you know, it's hard, and all of it is hard, but you just want to try to do your best to figure out what parts of your story really shine, and the books or movies or shows that really reflect that in a way that's easily digestible for someone who has not yet read your book.
Okay, that makes sense. Working on comps is something I'm working through right now, because it's useful for anyone, even if you're not writing query letters, just to pitch your book to people, be like, oh, if you like this and this, you'll probably like this too.
Right.
It's definitely a skill set. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So say you have someone who is submitting their query letters. They've sent them out maybe like 5 or 6, or I don't know what a normal number is, and they've gotten them all back. They've gotten all rejected. What's the first thing that they should probably be looking at to try to improve?
First of all, 5 or 6 is like, say 5 to 10 is the perfect batch for a first round. You don't want to send out all of them at once, because what if there's something wrong with your query letter? Then you've just like ruined your chances at this book with any of those agents. So 5 to 10 is the perfect sweet spot for sending your query out in batches. I would say at that point, if you have gotten all generic no's or silence or form letter rejections, then that's usually a good sign that there's something wrong with the query letter itself. If, however, you have gotten feedback that is personalized, so it's an agent who took the time to say, hey, I loved this about your query letter and your opening pages, but it just wasn't sitting well with me. Or if you've gotten people to say like, yes, I would love to see a partial of your manuscript, which is huge, celebrate that, please. and they've come back to you at that point and said, not for me, then that's something to worry about the actual pages of your manuscript for. Because if you're getting any feedback at all from an agent, that's a really good sign that your query letter is working. But if you're getting crickets, then it could just be your query letter. That's not to say that it's not also your pages. But you want to look at the query letter. And it's so hard. The summary paragraphs are so difficult, and they're hard for everybody. And I'd love to just give some advice about that if I can. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
So when you're writing your summary paragraphs, obviously the first thing you want to start with is a really juicy hook. It's your first sentence, like you want it to be short and snappy. It's where you introduce your character in the most dynamic way you can think of. And vitally, it's where in that first sentence or two that you set up the conflict of your story. And conflict is the really important part, because so many of us, when we're starting to talk about our book, we immediately go autopilot into plot. And that does not belong in a query letter. Save that for your synopsis. Plot, and this is very much like splitting hairs, but think about it this way. Plot is just the events from point A to point B to, all the way down to the end of the book of the stuff that happens in your book. The conflict is why that stuff is happening. So, choose every single word you put down on the page with infinite care and make sure that you're making it as clear as possible what your main character wants and what will happen if they don't get it, because that is the conflict that is driving your plot forward. And that is what is interesting when you only have 2 paragraphs to tell someone what your book is about. And then on top of that, that's huge in itself. You could spend months just figuring out how to distill your conflict in something that it sounds mildly interesting. What will really push you over the top is if you can then infuse those first 2 paragraphs with voice. It is very easy for you to distill your book down into this conflict and it's to still sound boring. And that's because you're not using any of the character's voice that you spent so long writing into your story and baking that into your query letter. So don't forget voice. Between the query letter and the synopsis, the synopsis is really hard. That's a whole other masterclass. But don't forget voice when you're writing your documents. The other thing about those 2 to 3 tops paragraphs where people tend to go off the rails is that they include things that shouldn't be there. So they think, oh, but the romantic subplot is so important. I have to have at least a paragraph for that in the query letter. No, you don't. If it does not add to the central conflict, get it out of there. You don't want to, I'm sorry, my fellow SFF writers, don't use your random made-up language words in your query letter. I am sorry. I, too, love all my nonsense place names. You get 1. You get 1 in each query letter, and that's just my arbitrary rule. But I think realistically, you probably get 1 random world-building word that makes no sense out of context, because otherwise you're just muddling the waters and you're making the agent curious about your world building when they should be curious about your character and the conflict. World building, you want them curious about when they're actually reading the book, but you have to convince them to read the book first. And if they feel like they're going to need a dictionary and tea leaves to get through your entire book, they're probably not going to read it. And then I guess my last little bit of advice about the summary paragraphs is for those of us who write multi-point of view books. This is the hardest thing to query, and I'm really sorry. I know, Michael, you wrote a really amazing multi-point of view book. It would be really difficult to distill that into a query letter because all of your point of view characters are really amazing and interesting and nuanced. Most stories, though, have one point of view character that either has more dominance in terms of page space, or they are the one that is really driving the conflict forward. They're the one who's making the choices that have ripple effects across the whole story. So figure out that character and focus in on them. If you really stretch things and if you really make your paragraphs as tight as humanly possible, you might be able to get away with, mentioning this other character as well, or maybe even giving them their own paragraph, but don't count on that. You'll probably end up having to go back and cut that out because, like I said, the entire query letter is like 3/4 of a page tops. If it's longer than a page, they're probably not going to read it. So be really, really ruthless about killing your darlings when it comes to editing your query letter, and know that it's going to take a lot of edits before it's really ready to go out to agents.
Man, you're just dropping bombs. Oh, that was really good. That was very useful. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
I feel like I learned a lot. Man, I never even thought about the multi-POV being a real big problem for query letters, though, because when you have such little space, I run into this all the time when, like, I'll run into family or friends, and they'll be like, oh, what have you been up to? And I'll be like, oh, I've been writing a book. And they go, what is it about? And I'm like, crap, how do I do this really
so hard.
concisely? Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, if you think about
especially
it,
when you have multiple people.
Exactly. Like, look at, since we were talking about Game of Thrones earlier, Winds of Winter. Mm-hmm. How many point of view character, like, chapters does that book have? A million.
Many.
But in that specific book, probably Ned Stark is the one that you would mention in the query letter. Maybe also Dany, but certainly Ned Stark. And even though we all know what happens to him at the end of that book, in the Winds of Winter, he was the one who was driving the plot forward, at least the plot thread that was going to have ripple effects across the whole of Westeros. So it's really hard choosing between your children in the literary kind of way.
Don't make me choose between my babies.
Yeah, it's hard. But you got to be ruthless when you're editing, man.
So it sounds like this area, it's not the synopsis, it's the...
it's like the book summary. Yeah, the summary portion
like little
of your
summary.
query
This seems to be the area where you can find the most impact for the biggest differences when you change. Mm-hmm. Are there other areas that are just as impactful, or it's like this is where you should really be focusing 90% of your time?
Yeah, I really do think that this is the part that is going to make or break you. When I was querying the third time around, I used the query tracker website, and I think I had paid for the subscription just so I could like put myself out of my misery and just like see where I was in the line of each agent's inbox. But their website at that time had said that there's like a 6% positive reply rate for query letters, which is insane. I mean, Matt and I are not on speaking terms, but even I know that that's wretched. But I used these in all of my experience, and I relied on friends who had been in the query trenches before. And yes, I had a huge leg up because I had been previously published at that point, but I was close to 50% positive reply rate. So I really think that this is the part that like pushes people forward. If you have prior publishing credits, though, of course that matters. Like that's obviously it's going to weigh in on things. So if you were previously published, then that might be a case where you put your personal bio in the first paragraph rather than what I would do for a new author, which would be putting it in the third. So if you're a new author, like the format should be, salutation, dear agent, then it should be go right into your paragraph summary, your book summary, 2 or 3 paragraphs, then your book stats, and then your bio. You've like your author credits if you have any, and like a little bit about who you are. If you have prior publishing experience, certainly if you're traditionally published, you'd probably put that bio section up front, or at least part of it. Or if you were an indie author who has been quite successful, put that up front. Otherwise, for everybody else, just put your bio at the end. And don't be discouraged if you don't have any publishing credits. I didn't when I was querying the Frozen Crown. So for my bio section, I think I said, I currently live in Wisconsin with a cat who may or may not control the weather. So like a little bit about me and something like a little funny to kind of show that I might be a fun person to work with. And then I signed off with like a thank you for your time and consideration. But yeah, so I guess between the summary and if you have prior publishing credits, that would definitely, weigh the scale a little bit. But at the end of the day, no matter how many best-selling novels you've written, an agent still might say no if they don't love your work.
I think it's really interesting that you keep pointing out, like, throw in some personality. Like, you worked so hard to write a book that has like voice and character and emotionally moves people. And it seems like it's really important to emotionally move somebody with this query letter if possible.
Yeah, 100%. Because you want the agent to feel like they are reading, like this is the first taste. This is the first taste of a project that they will probably read a dozen times before the book is sold. If they are going to read a project a dozen times, they want to know it's going to be something that they love. And they're never going to know that if you're just like handing them a resume. So like, you are what makes your book special. Make sure that shows through in everything you write, even things that seem very formulaic and restrictive as a query letter or a synopsis. So if you'd like, and I'm a little nervous I'm even offering this, I do actually have the last query letter that I used, the one that almost got a 50% positive reply rate. I could read it if you'd like.
If you have it, we would love that. That is amazing. I love how prepared you are.
Well, one of the things that I did when I was first querying was I read as many query letters as I could find from every genre, ones that worked and ones that didn't. There was a woman named Janet Reed, who I think has passed away, but her website is still available. And people used to send her their query letters, and she would basically tear them to shreds on her blog, like in a very nice, like, it was
constructive.
snarky, but constructive way.
I can get behind
there's
that.
like thousands of those on her blog, or at least there were. And that helps so much because it's really the only way you learn how to write a query letter is by writing your own query letter and then seeing what worked for other people. So this is my like little way of paying it forward.
No, I love that. The floor is yours, Greta. Please go.
So, dear agent, due to my previous agent, Stephanie Kim of New Leaf Literary, leaving the publishing industry, I am seeking representation for my standalone YA fantasy, The 10,000 Deaths of Liberty Bane. Liberty Bane is complete at 90,000 words and will appeal to readers who loved the pluck and wit of Enola Holmes and the magic and spectacle of Stephanie Garber's Caraval series. Just again as a side, the reason I put my bio up front, again, is because I was previously published, and to let them know that even though I don't have an agent anymore, it wasn't because I was a raging psychopath.
That's important information.
Yeah. Like, oh, we left on good terms. I didn't drive her to insanity. She just left the business. Yeah.
I promised.
Anyway, so had I not had prior publishing stats, this would have been my last paragraph. And I would have gone right into the summary, which is this. Just because Liberty Bane can't truly die doesn't mean she appreciates being murdered. And all for stealing some old key. In and out. Should count as a success. Too bad she caught a bullet in the head before she could make the handoff. Good thing she still has the key. It's her only bargaining chip against the opposing forces that have taken her two best friends hostage. It's a cat-and-mouse game through the coal-scented streets of the Triumvirate. And with the annoyingly honorable Inspector Justice Tenpenny at her side, Liberty needs to unravel the mysteries of the key and the uncanny magic it contains. For the key may just unlock the secret of Liberty's forgotten past and push two nations to the brink of war. Now, how to trade one key for two friends? It's all in a day's work for Liberty Bane. I am the author of the critically acclaimed adult fantasies, The Frozen Crown and the Seventh Queen, as well as the forthcoming Queen of Days, and I currently live in Wisconsin with my husband and two daughters who are doing their level best to take over the world. Thank you for your time and consideration. So it's not... Thank you.
That was amazing.
Thank you. Well, I was going to say, it's not the perfect query letter. There are parts of it that I would change even now as I'm reading it. But it did what it was supposed to. It got the attention of a lot of agents who then asked for more. If agents are asking you for anything else, your query letter is great. Like, you're already better than 90% of the people querying. So it worked. It did what it was supposed to do.
That is excellent. Oh my God. That was such a wonderful experience. Like, I did not expect that going into this interview. And this was very nice. I love how prepared you are.
Thanks.
Thank
I've
you.
learned from being a podcaster myself to come prepared.
I have noticed that podcasters do tend to do very well as guests, very conversational, very professional. I love it. Thank you for showing up with the skills.
But hopefully it's
Wow.
helpful
Okay.
for other people to hear what I mean when I say don't forget to add voice. Because I think that's what helped that query letter stand out a little bit, is that you kind of get the idea of Liberty's voice in how, like, you know, a little tongue-in-cheek, she is a little bit playful. And, you know, it's a fun book, and I wanted it to be reflected in the query letter as well.
Yeah, I really liked the part where it was the trade one key for two friends. I'm like, there's so much personality in that little line right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really what you're going for, is just trying to get as much punch out of every single word that you use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, choose every single word with care, because you have to be economical with, obviously, the amount of words that you have. So make sure that each and every one of them counts. And then, you know, put it in a drawer for a couple weeks and come back to it and then re-edit it. Rinse and
Get some
repeat
fresh
until
eyes.
you're happy. Exactly. Get as many fresh eyes as are willing to look at it.
So at what point of the process would you recommend an author starting to work on their query letter? Because they have to write the book and they're going through the million drafts that it takes to do so. At what stage in that process should they start thinking about a query letter and how it's going to look like?
Yeah. So this might be controversial, but I think it can be helpful to write just a very quick and dirty query letter after each major draft/revision. Because just the act of writing, of like having to distill your book down into 2 or 3 paragraphs, will show you like, oh, this part of my book doesn't make sense. Or, oh, this thing that I thought was really important about my book is actually just bogging down the actual goal of my main character. But also, if you do it that way and you keep editing it as the book grows and changes, you can kind of like track and see like, oh, my query letter has gotten so much better over the past however many months. And it'll mean that you'll have slightly less work when the book is actually done and you're actually ready to start querying.
That's smart. And it sounds like working on your query letter while working on your book can make your book better. So, you know, you're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all about, you know, that ruthless German efficiency. What can I say?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to the table. So what would you say is the most common mistake you see aspiring authors making while writing their query letter?
It's definitely the bogging down the middle sections with like subplots, with naming too many characters, and again, confusing plot with conflict. Lots of interesting stuff is going to happen in your book. I have no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean that those interesting things are what is propelling the action forward. And so really figuring out and distilling in your mind the stakes of your story and, you know, those things that what your character wants and what will happen if they don't get it. Make sure that that is as clear as you can make it. Because if the agent doesn't get the sense that your character is going to lose something if things don't work out for them, then they won't care, because it's just like another shopping trip, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I could see that. So, I got to stop starting all these questions with so.
I do the same thing. Don't worry about it.
As one of these days, I will grow out of this habit, but I'm just starting to notice how prevalent it is.
I do the Wisconsin
get
thing
through it
where
someday.
I end all my sentences with, you know? And I'm like, no, stop it.
This is not professional. Bad tongue. But something I did want to ask you that we haven't really talked about, query letter in general, we've mostly been hitting like the broad strokes of it. Are there any genre specific things that change a query letter? Or is it about the same across mystery, horror, fantasy?
I would say, yeah, it's going to be about the same. I think the key thing you're going to want to remember is that you don't want to give away the end. It's the greatest difference between a query letter and a synopsis. If the agent requests a 1 or 2 page synopsis with the query package, You tell them every single detail of the plot, including the ending. You're not trying to leave anything for them to be surprised by. That's not the point of a synopsis. However, the query letter, it absolutely is. The query letter is just the appetizer. You're just trying to get them interested in reading more. So don't give away the ending. And that might be something that you might like, oh, I don't want to foreshadow it if I'm writing a mystery. No, don't foreshadow it. Just write the inciting incident, the conflict, the stakes, get all that stuff down, and you want to leave them wanting more.
It's like an amuse-bouche, but of books.
An amuse-books.
I just love that phrase. Yes, amuse-books. Yes, I'm here for it. All right. Is there any final advice? If we could distill this whole episode down to something consumable for somebody who is just starting out, what would you tell someone who's trying to write their first query letter?
Take your time. It's going to take as long as it takes, but there's no getting it back once it's out in the world. So there's no second chances with it, really. So make sure that the first query letter you send out at that time is as strong as you can possibly make it. You may end up rewriting your query letter in the middle of the querying process, and that's okay. But it's something you probably would like to avoid, if you can. And I guess right along with that is saddle up, because it's probably going to take a long time. I really lucked out with my first agent in that she was like the first person I had spoken to. The query letter that I had just read to you, I think still took me like 6 to 9 months to actually sign with an agent on. And that was after I had 2 books already published with a major publishing house and a third one about to be published. So a fairly seasoned author at that point, and it still took a long time. Querying, I mean, people joke about it being called the query trenches for a reason. It really does feel like you're going to be there for the longest December of all time, and you've got trench foot and you're hungry and there are angry Germans firing at you. Like, it's just, it feels like the literary equivalent of World War I, and I'm sorry, but it's going to feel that way. Give yourself grace. Don't beat yourself up for every rejection that comes your way, and you will get a lot of them. Know that you're not wasting your time. And write something else. That's the best advice that you can have, basically, for any of these long doldrum phases of traditional publishing, whether you're querying for the first time or your agent is sending a book out to other publishers. Write something new. And I say this as someone who's been there. I wrote The Queen of Days while I was querying and being on submission with The Frozen Crown. So there's no words wasted. Keep writing and keep the dream alive however you can.
Great advice. Greta, thank you so much for coming on to the episode today. Could you tell the people, where can they find you? Where can they find your books?
You can find me mostly on Instagram these days, but sometimes on TikTok at Greta K. Kelly, as well as GretaKKelly.com. And you can buy these pretty little chaos gremlins wherever you buy books and in whatever format. And The Queen of Days, if you're an audiobook listener, recently, or a couple years ago now, because I keep forgetting what year it is, won an award. The audiobook is amazing. So if you're an audiobook listener, yeah.
I can confirm. I listened to it. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Yes, Sunil is amazing. I love him.
Excellent. All right, Greta, thank you so much. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya. All right,
Yay!
we survived again.